like a bird on a tree. I'm just sitting here, I got time, it's clear to see. From up here, the world seems small. We can sit together, it's so beautiful, you and me. We meant to be in the great outdoors, forever free. Sometimes you need to go and take a step back to see the truth around you. From a distance you can tell. You and me, we're meant to be in the great outdoors, forever free. You and me, meant to be in the great outdoors.
Oh, hello, I'm Robin. And now I'd like to tell you about my grandmother, my father's mother. She was a very strong Christian lady, and she died in her 80s. I was still a teenager at that stage, and I was just doing my homework in the kitchen one night, and I suddenly had a vision of her going up to heaven with her arms lifted up and just joy on her face into the glory and clouds of heaven, and we hadn't heard anything about her, and about half an hour after that the phone rang, and it was her daughter, my aunt, to tell us that my grandmother had just died. And so I was so thrilled to think that I'd actually seen, and the time that she had died was when the time that I saw her going up to heaven. And she'd always said to me as a child, she used to say, I'll be in heaven looking out for you, Robin. I'll be there waiting for you. And I know she will. Thank you.
And Robin, you said that you also saw her looking younger.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Yes, she looked younger because she was a bit frail in her later years, and she just looked. It's hard to describe really, but she just looked like she could dance for joy even as she was going up to heaven, and just the smile on her face, and her face was just lit up, like just with the glory of God in a way. And so, yes, she was just like a new person and a fit person. She'd actually, she'd broken her hip, which had led to her death, because in those days they didn't do hip replacements. And there was no broken hip at all there as I saw her go up. And she was just in my thoughts that night, and then I realised why after the phone rang, that had been when she was actually passing out of this life and into eternal life with the Lord. Thank you.
Welcome to my little den where I do all the editing for these DVDs. It hasn't been easy because as I began to edit photos and titles and making a movie, I soon discovered, quite by accident, that a lot of the software I was using was suitable for home movies but not for commercial purposes. So I had to buy all the software again, and this time they had to be for professional licensing for commercial purposes. So that meant I spent a lot of time relearning how to do all the film editing. People have shared their wonderful visions with you, and Robin shared a wonderful vision about her grandmother ascending into heaven after her death. And I want to share a vision that I had about my visit to my house in the new heavenly Jerusalem. In this vision, I found myself walking on the street, looking at these adjoined houses, each having only a single door, no windows. And then I was led to one of them, and I opened the door and entered. And I was aware that this would be my room for eternity. Not that I wouldn't be free to move through the city of the New Jerusalem or into paradise itself, but this would be my personal abode, the place where I would spend a lot of my private time. Now, when I entered the room, it was a cubic structure, and I was aware it was being illuminated from above because there was no window. And I looked around, and I just saw a sort of a table, a sort of mantelpiece against the wall, and something hanging on the wall that looked like a antique old picture frame, which could have been a mirror, but I know that it wasn't a mirror. And in looking around, I thought, and I must say, I was disappointed because I thought, am I going to be confined to this space for all of eternity? It's a bit cramped here. And as these thoughts were going through my mind, I noticed a door to my right. It looked like a sort of a wooden door. And so I opened it and stepped through. And I stepped through into what at first appeared to be a little room, but as I was stepping into the room, this room just began to enlarge and enlarge and enlarge, and just like you see cells divide in a biology time-lapse movie, these two rooms were dividing and enlarging, and of course it was the room I had just stepped into that was enlarging at an enormous rate. And very soon I could see as though I was in a conservatory of some sort with huge glass panels in front of it, and I could look through to an amazing view into the distance. Lawns and meadows in the front, then lines of trees, and then mountains in the back. And as I stepped further forward, all of a sudden more glass doors kept multiplying. And I heard an inner voice say to me, "How big do you want your house to be?" And I realized that each time I stepped forward, I was creating another room. And I could make it as large as I wanted by moving forward. But I never got that far, because that's when in the vision, I turned back and went back into the first room that I'd entered, and I realized that that was just a foyer. I thought that would be my room for eternity, and then when the voice said to me, "Well, how large do you want your mansion to be?" I thought, well, I could make it as big as I wanted to. And I thought, this will be great. I'll be able to have lots and lots of people around. And I was really delighted by that. But then again in the vision, I moved back out into the street, where again I saw these row of small adjoining houses. And I thought to myself, looking at that looking at these small houses, you would never think that there was a huge expanse of rooms and open spaces beyond each of these houses. And that was amazing for me. And it made me think of a special episode of I Dream of Jeannie. I don't know whether you've ever watched that comedy series with Major Nelson and Jeannie and his friends from NASA. And in one particular episode, Jeannie wanted to have a more luxurious house so that Major Nelson wouldn't have to do all the gardening. So she decided behind his back, while he was at work, to sell the house. And so she advertised house for sale, and a real estate agent came along soon enough with a prospective buyer. And so the agent and the woman stepped in through the front door, and you could see in the series that the woman, as she stepped into Major Nelson's rather modest suburban home, that she wasn't very happy. She looked around and she made the comment, "Oh, the rooms are rather small." And Jeannie, of course, with her amazing powers in this comedy series, she said, "Well, they're too small, are they? How big do you want your rooms to be?" And she said, well, I've forgotten exactly what she said, but she wanted larger rooms. So Jeannie, in her usual cheeky way, blinked. And so the agent and Jeannie said, "Well, step into the next room." And so the agent and the lady stepped into the next room, and wow, there was a huge palatial dining room like the one that King Henry VIII would have eaten in. And then she stepped into a fantastic kitchen. And then Jeannie said, "Come, have a look at the stables in the backyard." And stables in the backyard, and this prospective client got so excited. She said, oh, I must bring my husband, we must put a deposit down or buy it before somebody else sees this fantastic bargain. And so they left. And it was a very humorous story, of course. But I thought, that's the impression I got when I walked in the New Jerusalem and looked at my house, that initially I thought, wow, this is a bit stingy. It's rather cramped. And then for it to expand into these wide open spaces and beautiful views, and you could look out into paradise, and you would have never guessed from the street the enormous house that lay behind in another dimension or something that the Lord miraculously creates. And the thought that came to me firstly is, this means that you're very close to every neighbour in the New Jerusalem, and yet when you step into your own dwelling, you've got a huge expanse, obviously in another dimension as we would understand it. So the Lord is working miracles in this. But then as I was revisiting the vision for this particular video, I began to wonder about that antique frame that I'd seen hanging on the wall, because I couldn't see it clearly. It was sort of rather blurry. And because I was preparing for this videoing series, I asked the Lord, well, what was that thing I saw hanging on the wall in dull gold and sort of very antique framework? And as soon as I asked the question, I knew the answer. And the answer was that it was my life story engraved in a plaque. Isn't that wonderful? That the Lord will not forget what you have done on earth, and He's engraved it in a gold plaque that He will remember forever. We may not, but He will. And it's our life story. And what we do in this life is the inheritance that we carry into the heavenly New Jerusalem.
Like a bird on a tree, I'm just sitting here. I got time, it's clear to see. From up here, the world seems small. We can sit together. It's so beautiful, you and me. We meant to be in the great outdoors, forever free. Take a step back to see the truth around you. From a distance you can tell. You and me were meant to be